Hello again, my dear friends. We shall continue with our chat, uh, or you may call it as you wish. It's basically a condominium law course, but let me inform you that as we move forward within this program, well, obviously, the issue becomes more arid in my presentation because we have to get into reviewing the law and going directly into the condominium law area. Today, we will be talking about what is called an open call and the assembly. This is the way in which several persons in accordance to the Salvat Spanish dictionary, says that to make an open call is to make an announcement to people to attend to a specific event or the document with which you're establishing this open call. Within a condominium complex unit, an open call must be made, and the location where this will take place, the hour at which it will take place, and also the topics that will be presented. By analogy, I would say to you that in order to draft the project of an open call, and just remember that all legal persons hold assemblies. It does not matter if they are associations, cooperatives, mercantile associations, foundations, all of them, whenever the associate members will be meeting, they obviously have to be uh, convocated, invited to these meetings through these type of documents. And of course, the law with specific purposes, it has to state the number of days with which this open call has to be made in advance. And here, what you have to do with it is to look for the condominium legislation within the place where you are located at, and within it, it will be clearly stated how to make this open call in accordance to the local legislation and the articles of this particular law. So let us continue with my book, and by analogy, you may use the bylaws that you have created for the condominium unit. You may use the statute of the association, which is quite unique, of the Civil Association of Condominium Owners. Within this, it is stated how often this ordinary assembly is to take place. Normally, it's every year. And also, you include all of the rules for extraordinary assemblies or meetings. But in large condominium units, they do know that every year they meet during Easter holidays, or during the uh, Christmas holidays, or during the summer months. And within the deed of the Civil Association of Condominiums, it is stated how and when these ordinary assemblies will take place. But if they are not included within this official deed, you can put in place the condominium unit regulations and bylaws. And if you don't have that, you can use the condominium legislation available in your location. So go step by step. You normally follow what is stated within the law, the condominium law, because within it, it is clearly stated, and let me quote, based on what is established by the Articles 38, 39, 42, and 44 of the Condominium Ownership Act for the state of Guerrero, Articles 31, 34, and 35, etc., of the bylaw of the condominium and its administration, and also the statute of the Association of a Condominium Unit X. You are making an open call and for an ordinary assembly that will take place in X location located at at a specific time within this year, and this is the first call, and it will take place at such and such hours. Normally, the federal district legislation establishes that the first call uh, could uh, allow an assembly to uh, be conducted with 65% of the attendance. And then they have a second call and a third call, and they have 30 minutes waiting periods. But each of the condominium acts within the different states of Mexico is different. So, what I am trying to explain to all of you through this is that the open calls have to be made in accordance to each of the condominium units. Uh, they are not going to be dealt in, for example, in an ordinary assembly. The points um, within an ordinary assembly, but within an extraordinary assembly, the points will be quite different. Later on, I will be uploading this book in digital means, I believe through Amazon, and also I will be using Tinder. But well, this is the only of my four books that I have retained the rights of copyright. It is not the same with my other three books. So later on, I will let you know where you can access my book, and you will follow how to make an open call for an assembly. They're normally tailor-made. They're done in accordance to what you need. I have mentioned to you that it is not the same to have an open call of a condominium or a condominium unit which is by the beach, that when it is located, for example, in an area that has industrial parks, it might be an industrial park condominium unit or a public market could also have different types of open calls, because the issues that will be dealt are quite diverse. Normally, the manager makes this open call, but let me relate to you that this is rather historic. I was relating to you that the first laws that date back to the 50s were considering that since they were small condominium units, we didn't have these large condominium complexes that we have nowadays. They were smaller units with buildings that will have, 4, 5, 10 floors maximum. So the legislation normally assumed that the manager, the administrator, was going to be a condominium unit owner. Yet the assembly is integrated only by owners of this condominium unit. They're the only ones allowed to attend an assembly meeting, and also issue their vote. But the real owners are the condominium owners. But since the law traditionally was considering or assuming that the administrators were going to be condominium unit members, where there is no board of directors, for example, if it's only 5 or 6 units or owners, they appoint an administrator among themselves. So that is why this legislation historically gives room to allow the administrator, the manager, uh, to make this open call, to do it within 3 days. It allows a supervision committee, and well, also the board of directors of an association can make this open call, because most surely, if it is true that the law does not specify it as such, the bylaw adopted by the condominium units could agree to this. And also the Civil Association of Condominiums could agree upon topics like this. So as a lawyer, I could say that normally the administrator could make this open call, and they could be a condominium owner or not. In the large condominium unit complexes, normally they are um, persons hired outside, and they consider the board of directors of this association of condominium unit owners as uh, the real owners and the ones that actually act as the landlords of the place. If the administrator or the manager is no longer useful to the condominium unit, an assembly may be taken place only held by the condominium unit owners as a democratic entity, and they submit to voting the fact of ratifying or not the position of whomever has been acting as the administrator. The law does establish that in the case that the administrator, in a some kind of a twisted way, wishes not to make this open call for the assembly, the supervision or surveillance committee could do this within 3 days. Some of the uh, condominium unit legislations, a minority would also allow to this minority to make this open call, integrated by even just a 5% level. And whenever there is the presence of a conflict by a judicial order, an assembly may be summoned. Obviously, here, let me say to you that when you make an open call or in a way where something is being hidden from an open information, obviously the open calls are not done in accordance to the law, nor the assembly takes place within the domicile of the condominium. But for the act, condominium unit act in the state of Guerrero, they must be held within the condominium unit. So, for those of you that follow the Guerrero statute, do not hold your assemblies anywhere else. Because if you have any problem with a condominium owner, with someone who is creating problems, they will demand the annulment and the dismissal of this assembly because it was not held within the condominium unit. So I was telling you that these assemblies are normally tailor-made, and issues are aired and presented in the accordance and the size to the size of each of the condominium units. Let me go back to my book. Uh, I have already mentioned this. The legislation normally assumes that the administrator is a condominium owner in the small condominium units, and in those cases when the administrator or the manager is hired as a third party, the condominium could also make an open call when there is any problem presented by the manager with some of the condominium owners. Now, normally these assemblies do take place once a year. And let me share with you some of the areas that are normally presented and submitted to the consideration of the Administration Unit Owners Assembly, such as, for example, the proposal for the external auditing report, which is obviously important. And when we have large condominium units, uh, normally they have someone who is not a part of the administration. And it's always very positive to have an external auditing that will be presenting before the assembly, this democratic entity, their opinion in regards to how the administration is being performing. The manager will present his report. The supervision committee will be presenting also a report. This is the ordinary yearly assemblies. That's what we're referring to here. They could also consider uh, uh, salaries and wages for the members of the supervision committee. When we deal with large condominium units, they are supervising different works that are made within this condominium unit, and the important areas that are presented within the assembly, they also supervise them. They are not paid fees, but they are paid their per diems when they come from somewhere else. Now, also within this open assembly, the administrator is ratified or non-ratified. most of the times administrators are ratified, but I have been in circumstances where these democratic meetings, when they are subjects of the condominium law, for me, the assembly is the most important event of the condominium unit, and the supervision or surveillance committee has the same relevance as I have mentioned to you before. Because if it is true that the supervision committee could remove the members of the board of directors and replace them, also the General Assembly could change the members of the surveillance committee and also change the administrator. So that means that everyone is looking after everyone's back. Within an ordinary assembly, we also have to provide all of the powers of attorney given to the manager. In large condominiums, they have lots of problems to deal with in the administrative sphere, the tax sphere, the labor sphere. There will be problems with municipality. So it is very important not only to give power of attorneys to the manager in order to administer, and most surely they will be the ones that will be signing, for example, the checkbooks in the large condominium units or consortiums. The manager normally signs checks, but sometimes the chair and the treasurer of the board of directors do sign the checks too. But within these assemblies, they present and submit the consideration of granting powers of attorney for the manager, but also limited powers of attorney for administration functions. Because normally managers are not legal experts, so if they have a labor conflict, an administrative conflict, obviously the administrator could have time running against him. So, within this power of attorney, they must be enabled in order to give power of attorney to experts such as accountants, lawyers, tax experts, etc. So, within these assemblies, in ordinary assemblies, that in itself is quite an issue. Granting legal power of attorneys to the managers. Also, the yearly budget is adopted, which is presented previously by the administrator. Ordinary fees to be paid by the condominium units are determined. Extraordinary fees are also approved if there is any special work to be developed within the unit. Uh, if they have to look at a problem with one of the elevators, and if they need to change an elevator unit, well, they have to agree this within the assembly, and they will come to set an extraordinary fee. Let's say that the elevator is worth 1,000,000 pesos, and you have 20 condominium owners. Everyone must pay 50,000 pesos in order to obtain a new elevator. So then, within this assembly, let me also mention to you that whenever there is a conflict, such as, for example, Mexico City's law, does foresee the fact of having the presence of a notary public, but also within that particular legislation in Mexico City, if the notary public does not attend, they can have someone of the Procuraduría Social. This is a social special legal attorneys uh, that are involved in dealing with conflicts of condominium units. Uh, they also can grant public faith to these events only, but that is what the specific legislation of Mexico City states. Now, in regards to the areas that are normally presented within an extraordinary assembly, they are of a different nature, and let me mention some of them here. They are important areas such as appointing the new members of the board of directors, the appointment of the manager, approval of budgets, all of the elements that I have mentioned. But within the extraordinary assemblies, in accordance to the law, they are normally to respond to a minor problem, an official request granting powers of attorney for or a particular or specific problem. It is considered an extraordinary assembly because they are called with no notice, actually. They're immediately held in order to respond to a specific problem. I have the order of business of an extraordinary assembly held, and where normally in the ordinary and the extraordinary, they are aforementioned the members of the discussion table of the assembly, as if it would be a House of Representatives, because within this discussion table, they must appoint a chairman, a secretary, and rapporteurs. Now, they are the ones that count the votes. Then we also have a roll call list that must be signed, and it must be signed by the condominium unit owners. The quorum is determined. Then, in accordance to the law, we have to see if they have enough quorum in order to continue with the assembly. Then, formally, the assembly is formally open. So, being such and such hour of such and such day, and having this percentage of quorum, we formally open the assembly, stating that we have a board of directors present. So, an order of business in an extraordinary assembly could be quite different, such as the following: proposed in order to grant powers of attorney to legal representatives for the labor claims that the condominium is now facing. What I was telling you, that's why I was mentioning to you that if a condominium may not be formally associated, yet their agreements are not having any effects before third parties, but only among themselves. It's not erga omnes. So if an informal association that is not duly publicly established within a public deed have a tax problem or a labor problem, that's when condominiums owners will have problem in presenting and accrediting the legal personality that the condominium association should have. So there will be a problem regarding legal certainty, and even more than this, also of legal efficiency. And as I was telling you, that if there is any legal efficiency problem, there will be economic repercussions within the pocket of each of the condominium unit owners. Another issue could be the ratification or the modification of the fees payable to the administrator. This is that could be collected by a special fee. Normally, they are employees, but if they are wearing two hats, such as being owner and yet administrator, well, normally, as it is the case in most of the small condominium units, normally the manager or administrator is a condominium owner. So that is why there is an allowance for the administrator within the law to make a call for an assembly. But normally in the large units, it's an outsider. So here we see and deal with fees payable to the administrator within an administrator an extraordinary assembly. For example, if there's inflation, they come up and say, I'm not making enough. Now, also, rules are to be established for the use of tennis courts, the use of the pool. I mean, they're normally minor issues, different from an ordinary assembly where we have the report of the auditing committee, of the manager of the supervision committee, the ratification of the manager or non-ratification. Those in an extraordinary assembly, they're minor issues. Here, for example, we're seeing that there is a problem regarding the tennis field or the use of the swimming pool. Another minor issue could be to settle the issues regarding the elevator systems. So please remember here that we have already mentioned that if anyone is in debt of his condominium fees in most of the condominium acts that we have in Mexico, if you are delinquent in your payments, that means that they may have a voice yet not a voting power. So, though they may attend to the General Assembly, any agreement taken within an assembly will be at the end stated as valid. It will be effective for all of the condominium owners. What I mean to say by this is by non attending to a condominium unit, you may say, well, since I didn't vote in that point, I will not comply with it. That is non acceptable. Any agreement taken by the Assembly in accordance to the fact of being a democratic entity will be effective for all of the condominium unit owners. So here, I have already mentioned to you in the previous class or conversation that the previous assembly minute is normally read, but the standard is that the reading is excused because uh, it is not a fact of listening to issues that were dealt a year ago. So here, let me present to you the fact that the call for the assemblies, in accordance to the act, which is always different, there are condominium legislations that state that at the very least the open call is to be done 7 days in advance. That is not define the condominium unit. This is look at the statute of the association, the condominium bylaws, the local legislation, and this will tell you the precise way to inform the condominium owner, to inform them that there will be an assembly. Once the open call has project has been drafted, is normally posted within the elevator units and also within the common areas at the condominium. And also the laws establish that the call could be personally done, that must be signed back to establish that you have agreed to attend, or by certified mail, which is very seldom used now. You know, there are other parcel services that will deliver news to you in this regard. But most of the condominium bylaws also will allow have this open call conducted through internet means or by an email. So let's say that within an average timing to notify that an assembly will take place is normally 2 weeks, but it could be up to 30 days. But I mean, normally, if you live in a condominium building, they always know that within every year, at a specific time of the year, there is the ordinary assembly taking place. Some of them hold it during the months of December, others have it at the beginning of the year, others have it in the summer months. But basically, the statute of the condominium association normally establishes that it could be within the first week of December or the second or the third of December. So then, as a result of this, the open call takes place. It could be from 30 days in advance up to 7 days. It's up to each of the standards adopted. And well, we will be reviewing the law and the statute of the civil association, the bylaws of the condominium internally, which is not only dealing with the common areas, but it also touches the different elements that an open call should contain, how the assembly is to take place, also the attributes and functions of the board of directors and the administrator. And from here on, we go to the Condominium Act at the state where each of these condominium unit will be located at. So, Will, I've already mentioned to you that any uh, ill conduct, such as to uh, be deceiving the condominium unit owners not to attend to an assembly, manipulate it, uh, uh, hold it in a different location, and to reach agreements that are not shared among all of the members is already having legal problems, and if it is proven that this assembly was not done in accordance to the bylaw or the statute of the condominium within a civil court, you can claim the dismissal and the annulment of this assembly. And well, the judge will issue an order that this assembly will be taken place again, and that is what I had already mentioned to you before. Uh, Councillor Barrera Graf, he is a writer in mercantile associations and he's an expert. He establishes that the words of an open call should be clear to state the day, the timing, the name, and the signature of who has made this open call, and to state if it is the first, the second, or an extraordinary assembly, and the issues to be dealt and be aired within this assembly. This is what I have already mentioned to you. The name of the person and the signature of the person that is making this open call. That could be the manager, the administrator, the supervision committee, or even the chairman of the condominium committee in the case of large units. And it should include and mention if this will be the first or the second call, the number of attendants, the percentage of attendance uh, for, in order to consider if the assembly could be held with a certain quorum percentage. Martilla Molina, another author in this particular area in mercantile associations, what he states here is that it is idle to mention general points or general the order of business. He mentions that within the open call, they should only mention the issues that will be dealt with in the assembly. But from the mercantile association point of view, this is what he considers. But within a condominium, there could be general areas. Mantilla Molina does not agree in including general areas or other business. He considers this to be an idle practice, and the decisions will be the same. In my personal opinion, a civil association is quite different because in other business, minor relevant areas are touched, such as, we've got to repair the swimming pool, we have to check the uh, umbrellas at the beach area, or we have to check the uh, front desk, but if it has to do with industrial areas, for example, or a market, well, they can deal with the fact that, well, we have to fix, for example, the general waiting system within the market or the industrial area where you have an industrial park. So the weights need to be leveled and fixed. So what Mantilla Molina has stated, well, he's absolutely right in regards to the fact that, of course, main areas are to be mentioned within the open call, but only within a mercantile association, because in one like this, it's difficult to have general points. We normally would know what are the areas that will be dealt, but, well, nevertheless, obviously, it is quite normal that within all of the assemblies, even in the community land ownerships assemblies or mercantile assemblies, foundations, and so there are always general business to be touched, and there's always an associate that wishes to touch only the areas of their interest. So, well, now this open
La
call
convocatoria
must
debe de
contain,
contener
as we have
dos.
seen,
Primero, debe decir si es
if it is
ordinario o
ordinary or
extraordinario.
extraordinary, it should
Debe de
contain
tener la fecha, la
the
hora
date,
y el
the
lugar.
hour, and the order of
Y la
business. And the
notificación para
information
los
for the
miembros
condominium
debe ser
owner
por
should
escrito.
be in
Como
writing.
ya se los
But
dije,
if, for
si una
example, it
casa
is
más, por
a
ejemplo, es un complejo
complex with
de
four condominium
apartamentos
units,
en
like a
Estados
small
Unidos,
building,
un edificio,
well, I used
por
to
favor
live in a
recibe una
small building in
dirección
Mexico
a
City
la Ciudad de México,
in the
a la calle
street of
Praga
Praga,
30,
and there was
y
another
normalmente
condominium,
otro
and they were
condominio
very small condominium. The building in which I
el
lived
edificio donde yo vivía
had only
tenía
three
tres
apartment
apartamentos
flats, and the next one had
en la
perhaps
otra.
eight apartment
Entonces, pues ahí obviamente
or
va
units.
a estar el
So
administrador citando al propietario
that's when
para
the
iniciar
manager
la
or the
convocatoria
administrator hands over an open call to
de recibir
the owner of this
Acuérdese que
condominium
en una
unit.
asamblea
Within the
tiene que
assembly,
firmar la
you remember, you
autorización.
must remember that you have
Si
to
soy la
sign
presidencia, pues va a
the
firmar la
attendance
autorización de,
list,
de la
which will
asamblea
be
y que más
attesting
adelante
all
va
that will be
a enviar
protocolized by the notary
al
public later on.
secretario, ¿no?
So the assembly
Pero eso
means
no
not only to
constituye,
attend,
sino
but it
que
also
pues
implies
ciertas
certain
características.
features or
Primero,
characteristics
tiene que
such as to
demostrar
demonstrate
en muchos
in many assemblies
asambleas
that
que
you
uno
are
es
a
propietario,
condominium
que
unit
tiene una
owner.
copia
This is to bring a
certificada de
certified
propiedad
copy of
notariada
your
y
property
esa que
deed
tiene
or
la
title,
autorización
who
para
is
participar en la
allowed to
asamblea
express
para
their
poder
opinion
iniciar
within this
la
assembly and who
convocatoria.
can vote. The second,
Segundo, pues
to
si ya
sign the
cuenta con el
attendance
acta de
list.
asistencia para
So
que ya
once you are
haya
within the
citado al
assembly, you have
secretario y haya
this,
visto
and
asistencia
well,
y
this
eso
will
se le
be
va a anexar
attached to
al
the
acta
final
e
minute.
incluso
And
se va a
well,
redactar en el
even
acta
those that were
la
present and
precisión
that
del día
signed for
de
attending
su
will be stated
administración.
within the minute
Y
of this assembly.
déjeme
And well,
decirle que
I have already
normalmente
mentioned to you
los
that
candidatos
normally
entran a las asambleas
the working
directamente a su
team
trabajo, no
joins the
solo
assembly, more
participan
so
como
when it's a large
representantes.
condominium unit.
Cuando
You
hay
know, when we're
otras
talking about these
asambleas,
large units,
pues en realidad
normally
hay un
they have a
administrador
manager, an
y un
administrator,
contable
and they have
y
another area that deals with
un área
finances,
humana
another one
y un
that is
área
human resources,
financiera.
and another one
El área
with
financiera
material
es el
resources.
apoyo
The human
contable,
area deals
es el
with the accounting
administrador que
area.
normalmente
They
preside,
normally
es el
have a
contador
uh,
a veces son gerentes
managers of these condominiums.
y ahí
And
también
well, this
puede
manager
nombrar a ese
will
administrador
also
pues el administrador de
have
recursos humanos, o sea, normalmente a veces
whomever is
necesitan
involved with human
un
resources, like,
asistente que
you know, a
ayude al
secretary that
administrador
is
con algunas
helping
notas
the manager. If it's a
para
large
hacerse
complex,
presente
well,
también
that's quite different because
de
here
recursos
the human
humanos.
resources are very different.
Normalmente los
Whomever is an
recursos
expert in
humanos
human
conocen la
resources
ley laboral
is normally someone fully aware of the labor legislation, and
impuestos,
they can do
las
all the
liquidaciones, se comunican con la
um,
Junta de Conciliación,
layoffs and
con
payments and
los
settlements
trabajadores.
with the
Acuérdese que en
employees
materia laboral
because,
no
for
se puede
example,
hacer una
in the
reunión
labor law, this cannot be done before a
notaria
notary public.
no surte
Uh,
efectos si no tiene valor, no tiene ningún valor en una
this must be
conciliación
presented before the
laboral.
conciliation board,
En una
and they are
corte
labor
laboral
courts.
se me quedan los conceptos,
And
pero
it's truly that. It is a labor court. And they're called
boards en
conciliation
nuestro país
boards
pues son
in
cortes de
Mexico.
conciliación porque
And
esencialmente
the intention, obviously, as it is stated within the name, is to reconcile the interest of the
no hay conciliación
employer and the employee,
y le recaerá
and
lo que
the
llaman laudos,
final decisions are called
y
awards,
las
which is
sentencias.
quite different from a
Entonces,
ruling.
sí les digo,
And so a
recursos
human
humanos es
resource expert
verdaderamente capaz
is very important whenever we're dealing with large complexes in order
de
to
problemas
settle any labor
jurídicos con los que
problem
cuentan las
that
normas.
may come up.
Y la otra
And
es que debe
also,
de
when
requerir
you have to consider
también
material
honestidad
resources,
y
you
competencia
must have someone that is competent and
en
honest
procesar
in
obras
also
públicas
dealing with machinery
porque
and pipelines,
siempre
and
tenemos que
because
mantener
this is part of the needs of a
el
large
deber de
uh,
actuación honesta.
condominium unit, They deal with water heaters, with air conditioning units. Uh, they used to have central AC, but now we have mini splits. But nevertheless, you have to consider these three areas as condominium owners. So condominium uh, owners should consider capable people to be hired in these areas. And there are people that are quite tolerant, but I have been in cases where there is opposition within a condominium, and sometimes this opposition is rather minor. For example, 5%, 10% of what the condominium unit members, and the other units are very pleased with the manager. But at this point, here, in a practical way, quite often the owners of a condominium unit that live in Mexico City and they have, for example, their summer house in Acapulco, they call the manager and they said, "Could you please disconnect the refrigerator? Could you please help me look after this water leak that I have?" And the manager, who is normally persons that are very kind and friendly, they do agree to thanking they agree to do things for the condominium units. They request something in payment, such as, well, uh, pay for my cell phone calls or something. But, well, it is not their obligation. Let us remember this. But yet they do it. And quite often, let me share my experience with you. But when a condominium owner is really overdoing it and he's constantly asking for things, well, the manager turns back and says, "Well, that's it. I'm fed up." And then they start getting back to him, and then it becomes a conflict of someone who becomes opposite to the administrator. And they're a true headache indeed. The minority could make an open call, and normally the minority will be losing everything they are proposing because this is what the majority has asked. It's a democratic entity, but in order to reach a point of agreement, you have to do some sort of lobbying. You have to convince them and make a proposal and make it a reality. But it is a headache when there is a minority that you know that the assembly is going to be somehow itchy and difficult. So my suggestion, given a case like this, is that if you realize that the assembly is going to be really difficult, well, issue a power of attorney, name someone to attend in your name. In the condominium assembly, you can issue just a power document that is a mandate contract, which is a representation contract, and it is the simplest mandate that you may have. It is easy to get it. You can buy it as a stationery, but just watch out. It must be signed by witnesses. It is not just signing these uh, mandate contract that you can buy in any at any place, but you have to sign it by with two witnesses. Write down the name of the witness and also write down their electoral ID or their identity document, so you will be duly represented within an assembly. Because what I say to you is when you're not an expert in law and you have different professions, lawyers, architects, engineers, but when they know that an assembly will take place and it's kind of like difficult, do not expose yourself. Send someone to represent you and to touch the point that you want to achieve. Normally, the legal expert will be ready. If they are expert, they will tell you if you can actually pull through the point of agreement. But this will certainly save you for very little money to expose you to be subject of an offense or subject to lack
concurso
of respect. So
cuando
do not attend when you
ya digamos
feel that you're going to
es un
be,
principio
in a way,
general, ¿eh? Yo cuando
uncomfortable.
bueno, que no me siento
It's a
bien,
general principle. If there's anything I'm not feeling good,
si es
I,
un
do, I
principio
never
que
go
debe
to it.
existir, ¿eh?
You know, if I know I'm not going to be feeling okay, I
Entonces,
just will
de igual
not
forma yo
show up. So if
tengo
you
una
see
avisora,
that
una
within
avisora
this
en
assembly
esa asamblea
you won't be
para
doing
avisarme
well,
que
that there
puede
could
haber
be
una
some
ríspida, ¿no?
harsh
No se
behavior
trata
of one of the of your
de que
neighbors, do
se
not expose
regañe, ¿no?
yourselves.
Si va a ser
So
algo
send
serio,
someone
pues es
to
bueno
in your
decirlo
name to
y
represent you within the assembly,
y
and they will act in
y bueno,
accordance to your instructions.
que son
And
cosas
it's also
de la
important
mesa,
that
son
uh,
de dimes y
try to
diretes,
avoid
que
conflict.
inmediatamente
You
se
know,
tomen las
submit to the
decisiones
consideration of the
en la
assembly
asamblea
to see
para ver
if a
si
point that has been proposed
se está
will
cumpliendo
continue
lo que
being
hay
presented, and if it is not
de
agreed,
forma
well, they
interna
will
para
agree
decidir
if it is stands approved or
si
not,
continúa
and a specific
o si
proposal
hacen
will
un cambio,
be
¿no? Son
moving
cosas
forward. These are
prácticas,
practical, is
pero eso
practical advice,
aunque sea
but all of
simple,
this regarding condominium
pero eso ya
ownership is
muchas
complicated.
veces tienen la
But
suerte
if you're
de vivir en
lucky to live in a
situaciones
condominium unit
muchas
with
veces
no problems,
decimos la
uh,
fortuna
there's no everything is fine. But if
del
you're
lado del que uno tiene,
unfortunate to have
como le he
someone
dicho a clientes
that
míos,
you're not happy with as a neighbor,
al que
I have
no
said
lo
this
tolero,
to my
al que no le voy a
clients.
sacar mi
If
provecho,
you're not comfortable, if you're not happy, if you're not pleased,
aquí
tend to look for another place. You know, the more
eh,
so if this is your holiday
es
home.
importación
Uh,
como un lugar
I really believe that most of the condominiums in uh,
sí, el 80%
units in
de las
Acapulco
unidades condominales aquí en
are
Acapulco
um, uh,
son de gentes de la Ciudad de México
owned by people from Mexico
que
City
tienen
or abroad
una
that
casa
have a
cerca
holiday place
en
that they
México.
can use during the summer months or during their
Entonces,
uh,
es importante
Christmas
si no
times.
tiene ningún
So if
problema
you don't like a
de
neighbor,
nada,
let's get
vámonos
out of here.
vámonos
There's no need to take
fuera a
this
vivir, ¿no?
and move to somewhere else where you will be happy and
Así las
at
cosas.
ease. So, well,
Lo
this
más
is how things
importante
are. So,
de
the
las
most important
asambles
thing regarding
en una
the
asamblea
items
son
dealt with in an assembly is granting powers of attorney.
esencialmente es
Basically,
otorgamiento de
granting
poder
powers of attorney for the
al
administrator,
administrador
for the board of
para
directors, if the board of directors
efectos de elección.
uh, will be given
Se le van a dar
uh,
capacidades de sustitución
functions to
de
replace
esos
and
poderes
substitute these powers of attorney and
extintos.
hand them over to other legal
Ese es un
experts.
tema, a mi juicio,
Under my
que
consideration,
se
that is a quit of an
discute
assembly meeting
cuando ya son
when we're dealing with
unos
complex
condominios complejos.
condominium units,
Ahí mi
where a
amigo
good
el
lawyer
abogado que les
that will be dealing with an assembly or a large assembly
asambleas
meeting,
estaría
all of
considerando
the proposals are presented here, and the fact of its approval or not, or approving, for example, powers of attorney for administrative functions, for power of attorney for
pero eso
collecting and
eso es
representing you
se
legally.
pueden
Well,
otorgar a
these are different powers of attorney that could be given to the board
y
of
se le pueden
directors,
otorgar al
uh,
administrador
the manager,
facultades
with
de
the
poder
possibility of replacing
en
him.
dado caso
Given any emergency, such as, for
algo
example,
que les haya
uh,
fallado la luz
if there is an energy cut for the complex,
el
and that the
administrador
manager
tiene poder
could issue any additional
de
power of
para
attorney
defenderse
to a lawyer, so they will be representing
entonces
you
creo
at
que lo
court.
más
So
importante y clave
those are basically, under my consideration, the most important
asambleas
points to be dealt. And within the yearly ordinary
como
assemblies,
decimos
normally we have the report
el
given by the
administrador
manager, the
el
budget, the
administrador
report of the board of
de vigilancia el
supervision,
informe
the
de
report of
obras
public works within the
el informe de
condominium units,
obras
human resources,
recursos humanos
um,
eh, eh,
etc., etc., and a very
hay un largo
long etc.
y
Because this is also complicated. They also deal with
los sueldos de los
salaries of the administrator. They're also
porque muchas
submitted
veces
to the consideration of
son
the attendants because they're
trabajos
quite difficult
difíciles para el
jobs
administrador
for the administrator,
y hay que
and the salaries have to be
correcta
adequately
y las
authorized, and
prestaciones también,
also the
las
benefits
prestaciones
are to be
para
considered and their
sus,
expenses, because if they have
sus
any expenses,
viajes
uh,
cuando mandan
such as
a
collecting
representantes a
signatures in
México.
Mexico City or whatsoever. But
Normalmente
normally,
los
managers
agentes
are
son
very kind. And
amables
if you call them over the telephone from
y
Mexico
les
City
ayudan
and they're here in Acapulco,
y les
and
piden
you ask them to pay your property taxes, for example,
para
and that you will
municipales,
deposit in
estatales,
their account for them to pay
fiscales,
maintenance fees, they're
se
normally
puede
very professional
excepcionar
because
y
most of them
darles
have been involved in this area of condominium culture for
habitación en el hogar.
years and years.
Bueno, yo
So,
creo que
well,
ahora
I think that now
vamos
at this point we shall
a
continue
continuar
with other
con otro punto.
areas. The
El
reserve
fondo de
fund.
reserva
Well,
no
this
no
is
es
in order to cover
cubrir compras
purchases
de algún
of
tipo,
a
sino de
specific
maquinaria,
machinery, labor fees,
maquinaria
a
adecuada para el
tool
estilo
in order to provide
que se ha
maintenance
utilizado.
actions in due time. This is
Eh,
clearly established within the law. But
Esencialmente es
basically, this reserve
es
fund
dinero
is
guardado,
just to be
esencialmente es dinero
uh, held
es
there.
guardado
It is
para
normally
buena
money
administración, no
that good
solo en
administration
las épocas
keeps
de convertibilidad
with
normales,
good
sino
administration, and it is considered as a reserve
este,
for any emergency that may come up or any
repentino.
sudden
Por
need.
ejemplo,
For
es
example,
muy recurrente
let's say that the elevator
esas
breaks
cosas,
down,
pero se puede
well,
destinar
or the pool
dinero
filters
para
break
ello
down,
y
and well, a
puede
large pool filters will cost
utilizarlo
50 or 100,000
o la
pesos,
caldera
or the water
permanente,
heater, or the different
las,
units, you know,
se puede construir
or
celdas solares ya para suministrar
solar
electricidad para las
cells for
comunas. Todas
common
estas
area
cosas pueden ser
electricity.
un
So,
peligro
what I want to do is I want to continue
para,
following the book so we
dependiendo
can
de los
share
aspectos que nos
the
afecten.
areas of our interest.
El
The
informe no
administrative
solo
report,
ya,
I have
ya
already
se los
brought
comenté
this to your
también,
attention. It
el
is
informe
not
es un
only the
informe
report
que rinde
presented by the
el
manager,
administrador, sino que
but
también
also here,
ahí el
the
administrador
yearly
presenta
budget
sus
is
estados
presented here,
y presenta
and
sus
there, yeah,
ingresos
the
y
income
expensos.
and the expenses are
Hablamos en otra
also
ocasión
reported.
que
And
la
well,
apelación que
previous to
hizo
the assembly,
la
as we have
Cancillería
mentioned
sobre
before,
este tipo
he has already submitted this
de
information
condominios,
to the
condominiums,
condominium owners.
y
And if in
en
8 days
8 días
after the presentation of this information, there are
el
no objections to the report, business expenses report presented by the manager, it is considered as
importante, me
approved.
gustaría hablar un poquito
Here, I would
del
like to talk to you about the
de las
condominium
zonas
unit
ambientales.
and environmental
Esto
laws.
es
This is to be
vivir
able
sin
to live with
ruido.
no noise,
Como les
because
digo, a
as
veces
we have mentioned
tenemos
before, we may have a condominium
un
owner
condominio
that
ruidoso
is very loud,
y tenemos
or for example, if there is a discharge channel
la
coming
playa.
to our beach, you
Normalmente
know,
la bahía de
since the
Acapulco
Acapulco Bay
se considera
uh,
la bahía de
is
Acapulco
considered one of the most
una de las
beautiful in
bahías
the world,
si
if
no es que
not the
la más
most
bella.
beautiful. And I do
Sí
recall
recuerdo
that
que en alguna
in the
revista
National Geographic,
geográfica de los
dating to the
60 llegué a ver
60s, I
la
recall
bahía de
that
Acapulco
Acapulco Bay was
como
considered the most beautiful bay
luego
in the world, I believe
la bahía
second
de Río,
after Rio's, then San
San
Francisco's Bay,
Francisco
then Sydney's
y
Bay.
luego la de Sydney.
So in such a way that Acapulco
Acapulco
is
es,
kind of like a bull
considerada una
ring,
de las mejores.
where
Entonces,
the water
el agua que cae
that comes down to the ocean in certain creeks.
vertidas al mar
Well, there are multiple
es
lines.
multiplicada.
I believe that in Acapulco we must have at the very least 20 or 30
20 o 30
uh,
vertidas al mar
lines
en
that
ciertas
come
colonias.
straight into the ocean
Y
from different areas.
evidentemente
Obviously, there are
hay
condominium
colonias del
areas
mar en donde
where
no
they
está
have
conectado uno
a rainfall
con lugares
discharge area, and
lluviosos y
sometimes the
necesitan
scent
reguladores, aunque sí hay
is not
un
ideal.
sistema
Though we have a good
importante en
sewage
Acapulco.
system in Acapulco, it's
Es
important for you
probable
to
que
know that there is a
el
general
estado
act
general
of the ecological
del
balance
equilibrio
and protection of the environment
conveniente
that states,
dice
among
entre
other
otras
concepts,
cosas,
that it regulates
regula
the prevention of
la
environmental
contaminación ambiental
pollution
originada por
created
fluidos
by
de
fluids,
vibraciones,
filtrations,
de
thermal energy variations, light
electromagnética,
variations, electromagnetic
radiaciones
variations,
electromagnéticas,
and
gases
harmful odors
perjudiciales
for the
para el
ecological balance
ecosistema.
and the environment. So do take
Esto
note of
lo
this. This is
dice el
Article
artículo
5
5 en su
in
primer
its
artículo
Section
dice la
15
exposición
of the
15
General
de la Ley
Act
General
of Ecological
de Desarrollo
Balance
Ecológico
and
y Protección del
protection of the
Ambiente.
environment.
Esto
This
es, se
means
regula
that we do
todo
regulate
lo
everything
que
that
es
is
agresor
hurting
a
your
fluidos,
ears,
olores, radiaciones,
scent, the
eh,
odors,
los
vibrations,
vertimientos y
throwing
desechos al
waste
mar. Y
to
lo
the
más
ocean.
importante de todo
And
esto es
this has to do
regulación
with the Federal Marine
cuando se habla de zona federal
Zone,
no
which is not
necesariamente es
only
en
located in
Ciudad Obregón,
Acapulco or Cancun
puede
or
ser en
Puerto
Cancún o
Vallarta
en
or
Puerto Vallarta
Mazatlan
o en
or
Mazatlán.
in any or Los Cabos, any of these tourist resorts.
Es
This is
también
also present within
incluso
the water basins,
el lago
lagoons.
Cuomo de los
We
mexicanos,
have
que es el
Lake
Valle de
Como
Bravo,
in Mexico, which is
una de
Valle de
las
Bravo,
zonas más acomodadas
where we have the very wealthy
sus,
people of Mexico
casas
that own
alrededor
their
de esa
houses right by
laguna
the
de Valle de
sides
Bravo,
of
que por
this
cierto
uh,
provee de agua
Valle
a
de
la
Bravo
Ciudad de México
Lagoon.
porque ahí se
And
verten
it actually provides
subfluentes
water to Mexico City.
que
And
surcan
for example, this has to
el
do
Nevado de Toluca,
with the
que ahora ya es
water
un
collected from the
volcán,
Nevado de Toluca, which is an
pero
extinct volcano in the state of Mexico, and it provides water to
y
Mexico City.
estas áreas
There
que
are areas that
colindan
are close
con el
to
manto salínico-freático
water
de los parques
basins
lagunales
with
y los
rivers.
ríos se consideran zona federal, como las
They are
playas
considered a
lo son.
federal zone,
Y en el
as
caso
it
del
is the
mar,
case of
son 20
the
metros
beachfront,
que rompe la
which
ola del
is
mar,
20 meters from where the wave
hasta los
breaks,
20 metros que se consideran
20
zona
meters up
federal hasta cualquier
to where the property of the condominium
condominio
unit
nacional.
starts.
La ley de bienes
The General
raíces
Goods
establece en qué
Act is also the
categoría
one that deals with
zona
the federal maritime
federal
area,
marítima
and
y
it is
es
the
el reglamento
regulation for the
para el
use
uso y
and taking
aprovechamiento
advantage of
del
the
agua
territorial
territorial,
sea,
vías
uh,
navegables o
rivers,
valles,
beaches,
zonas de
federal and
ordenamiento
maritime
terrestre,
area,
terrenos
maritime and land
forestos,
area, and
bosques de agua.
forest
Busquen
and
ustedes cualquier
protected areas.
actividad
So take
en
note,
su
if
condominio
anyone has a
en la
condominium by the
orilla,
side
de un
of a
río,
lake, a
a
river,
la orilla
or a
de una
beachfront,
fuente de mar, en la playa,
you should
para
be
que se
familiar
familiarice
with everything
con la
related with the
regulación de las
maritime
aguas del
federal
México.
zone. And
Acuérdense que no
well, remember,
necesariamente es curioso,
not
no
because you have a
necesariamente porque ustedes
beachfront
tengan las
and the
aguas
federal
federales
zone right in
cerca,
front of you,
les
they
van
will be
respetar, darles esa
giving you a
especial
federal
tratamiento.
zone.
Si
If
ustedes
you
se duermen
overlook this
y
and
saben
any neighbor
que tienen
has a
una
small
pequeña
uh,
palapa o cualquier otro
palapa or a
establecimiento,
restaurant, they
les
can
puede ganar
take this
la
license right
autorización
because you
y no
need
se
not to
necesita
have
tener
the
enfrente,
beachfront.
sino que
It
también
could be
puede
someone
ser
right
una
next to
persona que
you.
esté a un lado, de tal forma de
So
que saquen
make
su
sure you get your federal
autorización
zone license
federal para que
so
esto no
this
les
will
dé
not
un
give
dolor de
you
cabeza.
uh, a future
Ahí
headache.
lo explica
I'm
en el libro.
explaining this clearly
Dice,
within the book,
y les
and
digo,
let me state the
diferencias, por
differences,
ejemplo,
such as a
concesión
license is the
es
right
derecho
granted by
otorgado
the
por el
federal
Ejecutivo
executive
Federal a
through
través
the
de la
ministry in
autoridad del
place
ramo
with the
que
intention
corresponde
that
para
and the
los
actions that
ejercicios de
correspond to
composición
other
jurídica
agencies in
a favor de
favor
personas
of
físicas o
physical or
morales en
legal
lo que
persons to take
concerne
advantage of the
a las reservas
maritime
federales
and ground
naturales
federal
o a
areas
los
with
terrenos
those
titulares al
lands
mar
attached
o
to the
cualquier
ocean
otro
or
depósito
anything else that is
que
located
sea
within
federal.
marine waters.
O sea,
So, well,
es
this will
les van a
provide you
ustedes dar
with a
permiso para
license
poder ocupar
to
esa franja.
make use
Ese
of
es el
this
requisito. El
range.
permiso
And
para
there are
distribuir
several
energía
elements
a
here.
la zona de
The
México.
permit
El
is the
permiso es el
right
derecho
granted by
otorgado
the
por el
federal
Ejecutivo
executive
Federal
through
a
the
través de la
ministry in
autoridad
place
del ramo
in the
de
intervention of other
intervenir en otros
agencies of the
países
government uh,
con la intervención de otras
of the federal
autoridades de la
public
administración
administration
pública
in
en
favor
favor de
of
personas
physical
físicas y
persons
naturales
to
para usar
use
de
in a
manera
transitory
transitoria
manner the
los
federal
diferentes
maritime and
lugares.
terrestrial area.
Esto
It
es,
is
no es
not
en forma de
definite,
segunda,
but it is
sino
in
que es
a
de forma
transitory
transitoria con
way.
permiso.
This,
Y
and
luego
then you have
viene
an
la
authorization.
autorización,
That is when
es
the
cuando el
federal
Ejecutivo Federal por
executive, through
igual
the
o a
ministry in
través de la
charge,
Secretaría encargada, eh, eh, eh,
will grant
sobre las
the
cuales se otorgaron las
concessions or the
concesiones o
licenses
permisos
or permits
o se
where the
establecieron las
federal
instalaciones
maritime area was
para ese
established
efecto,
before the ocean
o cualquier
or
otra cosa
anything that will be
relacionada
created with maritime
con
waters.
aguas marítimas.
So what
O sea,
this will do
va a
is will
autorizar
legally
este,
authorize and license
la
any
modificación
modification
de las
of the
bases
basis or
y
the conditions
condiciones
in accordance to
conforme a las
which we
cuales
would say
diríamos que
that
una
this is a
autorización es una
modification to the
modificación a
license
la
or the permit.
concesión o al permiso, ¿verdad?
So my
Entonces,
suggestion is that you
léanse
will
esa ley
check this
con
environmental law,
cuidado.
and
Ya
within
vamos a
our
pasar
next
a la próxima
chat,
clase
we will
sobre
be
la
looking
conservación
at
de
how to
documentos que se pueden tener
the
en las
record
oficinas
keeping of
de
documents within the
administración.
administration.
Vamos a ver
We will be touching
parte de
areas regarding
ustedes. Vamos a
your
ver que
payments
una
as
vez
a
que son
civil
asociación civil autónoma,
association of
tienen una
condominium units.
tarjeta
You
para
have
presentar
to
su registro
have
civil
your
y su
IRS
tarjeta.
number,
Y si
and if
usted
you
tiene una
make
autoridad
profits
porque tenga
because you
este,
have a restaurant or a
pues vaya a
coffee
una
shop or
cafetería,
a small
una
drugstore
pequeña
or
farmacia o una
a
pequeña
convenience
distribuidora de gas,
store, you will have to pay
pues van a pagar CIDES
taxes,
sobre la renta, van a
to
pagar
added
CIDES
value
sobre el abono,
taxes
ADVALS sobre
regarding
la remuneración,
income. You
van a
will have to
distribuir a
enroll
los trabajadores
your
que tengan
workers in the Mexican
seguro
Social
social
Security, in the
en el
Mexican
Instituto
Institute of
de
Housing called Infonavit.
Infonavit,
You will have to
van a
pay
pagar el seguro
retirement
para el
funds.
retiro,
We will be
este,
talking in the next
labores en las
class
oficinas
about
públicas
labor
o
relations
particulares,
and
los
contracts
contratos
with
con empresas
professionals and
internacionales de operación,
operators
eh,
as third companies, and I will talk about
autoridades y las
condominiums and the
autoridades.
government officials.
Ya
We have
los
already talked about the fact
procedimientos
that
para
contracts with
empresas
professional companies,
profesionales
because we
de
have
operación
mentioned that the
internacionales.
surveillance or supervision committee will sign these
Entonces, yo creo
contracts.
que por hoy
So, well, dear
vamos a
friends,
estar
I
creo que
thank you so
terminando
much.
esto.
As I was
Recuerden
telling you,
que ya no son
these are not
charlas tan
uh,
formales porque
so
estas charlas, estas clases
uh,
interesan realmente solamente
ideal
a
presentations
un
in
condominium
my here
de
because
comunidad,
they are
a un
good
condominium
for
complejo
those
de
that are
administración.
involved in large condominium
Yo más
units.
adelante
They become
voy
arid points because we're touching elements that are of legal
a
nature.
presentar
But later on, I will tell you how to be
libro
able to
del
have
condominio
access to my condominium
que ya he
book
publicado en dos
that I have
ocasiones.
already published
Este,
and to make it available in within internet. Thank you so much.